our next presenter is Bert Ho, who will be speaking on delineating maritime cultural landscapes at national parks. And the subtitle is Dry Tortugas National Park and St. Croix Scenic Waterway. Bert Ho is an underwater and marine survey archaeologist with the National Park Service's Submerged Resources Center. Prior to joining the SRC, Mr. Ho worked for NOAA as a field hydrographer. That is a really hard word. Supporting the Office of Coast Survey by collecting various marine survey data to update charts, locate navigational hazards, and respond to emergencies in ports on all coasts. Since joining the NPS, Mr. Ho has conducted underwater archaeological site documentation, exploratory marine survey, and a variety of submerged resource science through the NPS system and with international partners in Africa, South America, Central America, and the Pacific Islands. His interest and focus are to aid parks and resource managers in their efforts to locate, document, and interpret submerged cultural resources from prehistory through the historic period and continue to explore new regions of the world to discover these resources. Welcome.
Hydrographer is really just a fancy word for survey monkey, like that's all. I just drove a boat back and forth. I mean, if you've done survey. Yeah. Well, thanks for the invitation. Thanks for thinking of us, our little office in the Park Service. When Mike Russo emailed us about participating, he specifically referenced the work we were doing at St. Croix Scenic Waterway, which is not too far away from here. And I have my own opinions about that park and how it fits into the register, and I'm going to try not to voice my opinions on it too strongly, so I'm not going to say things like it's perfect, it's a perfect riverway landscape, cultural landscape. I'm not going to tell Barbara, Paul, or Mike Russo, you know, if you need an example, here you go. It's on a silver platter. We just finished the draft report. So I'm not going to share those opinions, but, you know, if you come to that same conclusion, well, maybe I did my job. But so we're the Submerged Resource Center. We're archaeologists and photographers, and we work throughout the park unit or Park Service system, and we do work internationally with partners. I'm going to try to have more pictures than words, so if you don't read all that, that's okay. We do manage a lot, or actually we don't manage that much, but the Park Service does manage a lot of waterways and seashores and lakes, areas that sometimes you don't really think about, like Lake Mead outside of Las Vegas. We do a variety of things. You have to go from Channel Islands, which is cold water, to Dry Tortugas, different time periods. Sometimes you're diving on a house in Lake Mead or an airplane, and next you're working on trees in Jackson Lake outside of Grand Teton. And then that's spires. Sometimes we get to do natural resource stuff. You know. A lot of what we do for parks is Section 110 and Section 106 work. This is kind of where I feel like we have a unique job, where we're field archaeologists. We get to make management recommendations, but we don't really have to make any decisions. Like, that's great, right? You know, you're not really responsible for the decisions that parks decide, but you know, a lot of times they're relying on us to do the underwater work. It also helps that we get to meet a lot of the people. We get to meet a lot of the resource managers, the archaeologists in parks, and that's great. We make new friends, but then the flip side is we also are like their sounding board. You know, we hear the budget complaints, how they're asked to do more with less, and in some cases they're actually asked to do less with less, which, just like everyone in this room and every resource manager, natural and cultural, doing less with less is just not acceptable. It's not something that any resource manager is going to allow themselves to do. So we can help. We can help with 110, we can help with 106, and we try to do as much as we can. I guess if any of you guys know us personally or see our office's Facebook page, you probably think we're never at home, which sometimes it does feel that way. We are never at home. But that 110 work is well, actually, let me back up. The St. Croix National Scenic Riverway is a perfect example of some of the 110 that we've been asked to do this year. This was a project that we just finished the report. Geneva Wright and Jessica Keller just finished the draft report. It's being reviewed by the park. It's a couple hundred pages of dams, which I'll talk about. And it's actually, this is why I'm not going to share my opinion about it. Hopefully you'll see that this is a great example of where the landscape is being altered by human activity, and it's continuous, they're integrated, and there's a lot of examples. St. Croix, if you're familiar with the area, is actually not too far away. It's the border between Minnesota and Wisconsin. We primarily worked out of the park headquarters on the Wisconsin side at St. Croix Falls, but we actually stayed in Stillwater. So, the state's got federal money, our travel and food purchases on both sides of the river, so that was good. We also got to work with regional archaeologists that we don't really work with, and that's MWAC, Midwestern Archaeological Center. We work with SEAC a lot in the southeast, but Aaron Dempsey, Nora Greiman, I don't know if they're watching, but hello if you are, and they were great. They're MWAC archaeologists in Lincoln, and they were able to work. And this is another example. They're terrestrial archaeologists. We're primarily underwater archaeologists, and this is a park that both of us are working together. So if that says anything, it just kind of tells you this is a terrestrial, this is a landscape, a true landscape where they meet land and water. What it is there's a, if you're familiar with Minnesota in this area as well, timber was a big industry in the early 19th century. Starting around 1830, they were using the St. Croix River to transport the lumber from the north on down, eventually through the tributaries in the Mississippi. And they built a number of wing dams, closing dams, and they were done to manipulate the river, to manipulate the flow of the river, and also to help guide deeper channels. And then they were also using closing dams to close off areas around islands to store some of the timber so that it didn't jam up the river, create a log jam. And so they had these structures built by the Army Corps Engineers starting in 1878 to 1896. So in a matter of 18 years, they built well over 100 structures. And these structures are mainly rocks with brush, and some of them have timbers in them. And they would redirect, they would carve out the deeper channels so some of the boats could travel more easily, as well as just floating more logs down the river. So the project was first to kind of do the historical research with Jess Keller, and Geneva Wright did most of that, and they were able to locate some of the historic maps. They geo-rectified them. We took our side scan. We could see quickly the water's not very clear, not like my next example, but you could see the structures in the side scan. You could see them sometimes from the surface of the boat, sometimes when you ran your boat into them, but you could see that they're there. So we kind of tried to pick examples that were diagnostic, a good wing dam, a good closing dam, where there's still a lot of structure left. And there is. I mean, some of the organic material, of course, the brush isn't going to last in a river that freezes every year. Some of the logs aren't going to last either, but the rocks are still there because we run into them. And so we mapped a number of them and kind of came up with, I think there were about 30 that are in the report. And they're representative. They're representative of the dams. There's, I think, 127. We documented around 30 of them. But the reason I say it's perfect in that this was humans modifying a landscape. That's one of, that it's unique. I think there is a lot of structure remaining. I understand it doesn't meet the criteria of having all the structure or maybe not even most of it. But the way I look at this is it's more of a system, and the system is still intact. It's still guiding the river. You can go there and you can see that there's growth all over closing off on one of the closing dams. It's still changing the river. It's still affecting how people operate on the river. Obviously, they have to go around these things that are sticking out. So as a riverscape, or as a landscape, if we don't want to add riverscape as a term that Jim said earlier this morning, as a landscape, I think it does fit most of the criteria. The report has been written, and kind of one of the recommendations that they made, the authors made, was, this could be a district. I think as a district right now, the report would be pretty complete for nomination. But if we are to create, a landscape designation, I think this could also fit that as well. I don't know if I've convinced any of you guys or tried to share my opinion. You can read the report. That might sway you if you're on the fence. The next site is Dry Tortugas National Park, and this is a beautiful park. Park Service has been doing underwater work here for decades, well before I was around. And it's 70 miles west of Key West. It's in the Florida Straits. The primary feature is Fort Jefferson, which was one of the third system forts, large brick fort. It's never really completed, but it's a Civil War era Union fort way down South Florida. The Fort Jefferson National Monument, 1970 officially. And not to plug another conference, but I'll talk more about that at SHA in January in Washington, D.C. if you'll be there. So, the fort has a lot of shipwrecks, probably well over 100 shipwrecks. As far as designating sites, there's probably less sites because a lot of them are isolated finds. There are cannons, anchors. I don't know how many anchors and cannons we found just in a couple weeks this summer. There were 3 more shipwrecks we found, and not just shipwrecks with ballast, but actual structure underneath them. You can't, like my coworker Dave Conlon says, you can't sling a cat without hitting a shipwreck in Dry Tortugas National Park. And not that we would sling cats, but they are everywhere. And the reason I'm using this example is there's a lot of construction wrecks. There's a lot of wrecks that contain the construction material that was destined for Fort Jefferson. There's granite, there's greywacke, there's cement barrels, which are barrels that were full of cement powder, and then when they hit the water, they turned into concrete barrels, and the wood fell off over time. So there's a lot of examples of that. There are, got one more for you. Oops. Sorry. And this one is aptly named the cement barrel wreck. There are about 8 that I could count that are shipwrecks that have significant amount of construction material. And my suggestion, of course, I can only make recommendations, I don't make decisions, is that these could be added if there's a way to add to the designation of Fort Jefferson, that these are directly related to the fort. They are archaeological sites that are features of the fort, in my opinion. Or, if you want to make Dry Tortugas and try to encompass more of the cultural resources there, which there are a lot, and they span hundreds of years, you could add it as potentially part of a landscape. I mean, under the designations right now, I think they could fit, just the construction wrecks could fit as it could fit some of the criteria, and that it is kind of unique. I don't know all of the third systems forts. I don't know how many of them actually have shipwrecks in their vicinity with this amount of construction material. So in that sense, maybe these are unique. Maybe Dry Tortugas is unique for that time period and this kind of material that was destined for these forts. So that's my argument for that one. I wrote this a little while ago, and actually listening to some of the remarks this morning, it could be a discontiguous district. Obviously, you could try to link these construction forts and the bricks that are on there to some of the areas where they came from, in Pensacola, Massachusetts, Apalachicola, where a lot of the bricks for Fort Jefferson came from. But we are parks. We do have boundaries. I know as a society, we draw lines, imaginary lines, and this side is mine, that side's yours. You take care of this, I take care of it, you take care of that. So for management purposes, we do have to have some boundary, or else it's just unfeasible for any agency, state, local, federal, to try to manage what's in there. So my boundary is kind of, and it's based on an activity. It's based on the construction of the fort, and that's what I would propose, is that you take these construction wrecks, and if they're unique, great. If they're not, I could argue that they're unique. Again, another opinion. I mean, cement barrels. And there's also cement sacks, which are also interesting. But I could argue that this is unique. It could may meet criteria A, C, and D, or I would just say add them to the Fort Jefferson's monument designation, if that's possible. Add these as archaeological features that are associated with that. I don't know if I've swayed anyone with my strong opinions that I did not share, but I just want to say thank you for having Submerged Resource Center here. I know Dave Collin wished he could be here, as well as the other archaeologists in our office. And if you have any questions, we'll wait till the end, right? Okay, thank you.